But today we're going to talk about agent design and some of the problems that Riot is going to have with its agent design in the now and the future. Because with the release of the new Agent Waylay, this was some of the reaction from the Valorant subreddit here when Waylay's abilities were kind of first announced. This is some of the comments that you can find if you scroll down. Are they just a mix and matching the agent's abilities at this point? Breach ult plus Jet Dash plus Clove Decay plus Clove ult, but in reverse. Scroll down a little more. So they created a new agent to add to other agents' abilities to her. Meh, I expected more. It feels like they're trying to cram in too much stuff. We end up with Waylay, who is just Jet with Breach stuns. Right? This kind of reaction to Waylay as basically, oh, isn't this agent just this, but slightly different? The reaction to Waylay was way more pronounced in terms of that kind of reaction than I'd seen for any other agent before. And it makes sense because when you look at some of Waylay's abilities, you can go, oh, this dash is basically a jet updraft with a jet dash, put together. Oh, this new ability that they're calling it, does look kind of like a breach stun, but just without the visual effect. In fact, the actual designers themselves said that. Okay, well, isn't that kind of just similar to some of the other stuff we've already got in the game? And of course, as Valorant carries on and more agents are added into the game, isn't this just going to be a bigger and bigger problem as time goes on? And the answer to that question is, yeah, probably. So today we're going to talk about that problem and how Riot can potentially kind of ease some of those things, at least for the short and medium term. So let's dive into it. And first of all, we're going to take a look at Waylay and just talk about Waylay. Some of you who are, fans of the channel will have seen these Venn diagrams before of me, categorizing agents and kind of their subtypes and stuff. And if we were to put Waylay onto the kind of Venn diagram, Waylay would probably go somewhere around here, right? In with Jet, Neon, Raze, that kind of area. And of course, when you think about agent design and designing agents, you look at this now and you do see, yeah, it's pretty crowded in there. Right? Yeah, there's like 4 different agents that are all, kind of competing in a pretty similar space. So yeah, these agents are going to struggle perhaps to stand out on their own and, aren't going to quite be, kind of maybe the force that comes into the game that we might want them to be. And of course, that is going to lead to people asking questions like, isn't this just X but slightly different? Well, yeah, when you've got so many agents kind of crammed into a similar sort of design space, that's probably what's going to happen. But as I mentioned, of course, as we go on further and further through time, this is just going to be a bigger and bigger problem. And you can think about this in terms of, when Fade was released to challenge Sova in that kind of recon space, right? When you had an agent like ISO who was challenging Reyna, when you had an agent like Deadlock who was, challenging Sage, right? They were similar agents in the way that they played, but they were different enough to make you feel like, oh, I can still play Deadlock on this map and Sage on this map if I want to, right? Like, there was differences there that allowed you to, kind of pick them apart. But if you think about, like, what if we added a third recon initiator into the game? Right? You'd probably start thinking, well, most likely what's going to happen is whoever the worst out of Sova, Fade, and that third recon initiator is, they're probably just not going to get played. And of course, all of these problems are essentially coming for Riot, right, as we go down into the future, because there's just less and less design space that they haven't already explored. In fact, when I think about it and think about like what agents right now are like completely unique and there is potentially space to, challenge them with a new agent, really the only one I can think of is Chamber, right? The Chamber is a very unique agent in the Sentinel class, and there probably is space to make like a second Sentinel that, is very aggressive like Chamber is, right? But other than that, you look around and it's pretty slim pickings in terms of where the obvious other design choices are coming for Riot. So today I'm going to talk about a solution that it will at least help Riot, in my opinion, design agents in interesting, unique, fresh ways that can overcome some of these problems, at least in the short and medium term. Long term, this probably won't be that great of a solution and they'll need to think of something else. Of course, once we start getting to 50, 60 agents, if we ever got there, you're gonna start running out of space and, then you can start talking about agent bans and all that kind of stuff. But for now, what can they do? Well, what I'm going to talk about is non-linear agent design. And what am I talking about with non-linear agent design? Well, basically think of it as when a new agent comes out, you probably are already assuming some things, right? Like they have 4 abilities. They have 4 abilities that cost somewhere between probably 100 and 400. That they have an ultimate that costs somewhere between 6 and 9. Right? These kind of things that are just kind of automatically baked into pretty much every agent in every single way, those kind of things are linear agent design. So non-linear agent design is things that goes against that, and there are already some examples in the game. Perhaps the poster child for this is Gecko. Because Gecko, when you take a look at Gecko's actual abilities and break them down, you could very easily squint and just say, isn't this just X but slightly different? The Flash, isn't that just a Rainer Flash but a bit different and it moves? Isn't the Wingman just a boombot that can plant the spike and defuse it? Isn't the Moshpit just another Molly? Isn't the ult just a Skydog that detains rather than stunning? You know, you can say these things about Gecko and his abilities and squint and go, yeah, that kind of, it seems like things that are already in the game pretty much. But Gecko, of course, has one massive difference to other agents, and that is the cooldown time, right? The 10-second cooldown and retrieving the orbs from the floor, that's a major difference to Gecko than other agents. And so even if you do say that some of Gecko's abilities are very similar to other abilities that are already in the game, when Gecko came out, it didn't feel like that. It felt very fresh because, hold on a minute, this agent plays very different because I'm having to think a lot about, am I going to go and retrieve that orb? You know, how can I maximize my 10-second cooldown to just keep using these abilities and spam them over and over and over again, right? That's what we were thinking about when Gecko came out. And so the problems of, hey, isn't this just a Skydog, but, you know, it detains? That wasn't really on people's minds as like a negative thing. That was maybe in people's minds as a way to explain how to think about the agent, but not in a negative way, because the agent, we could all see, was still playing very different, and we could think about, oh, all these cool little things that we could maybe do with Gecko that you can't do with other agents. And that 10-second cooldown is non-linear design. There are some other smaller examples as well, like Rainer, for instance, having two abilities combined into one ability, essentially, right, would also count as somewhat non-linear design. It's not an extreme example of it, but it is an example of, you know, kind of twisting the design rules slightly. And Riot is going to have to opt in to non-linear design in some of their agents soon enough. And the reason that I say it's not a long-term solution, of course, is once you start doing all these non-linear ideas, eventually you're going to run out of them as well, and then we're back to the problem, right? So super long-term, maybe not a solution, but certainly in the short and medium term, this can be a solution, because there are plenty of ways that you can come up with non-linear design ideas that would lead to some pretty interesting agents. And non-linear ideas will often start out with kind of an interesting question about an agent, I think, right? So for instance, when designing Gecko, I'm sure one of the first questions that came up, if not the first question when designing Gecko, was, what does an agent that has a 10-second cooldown look like? How can we design that and have it not break the game? Because that is a crucial thing with non-linear agent design, and it's probably why, for the most part, Riot has shied away from doing it too much so far, is because that they very easily can completely break the game, right? They know with the kind of linear agent style that, you know, they can probably figure out how to balance that pretty well. But with Gecko, you know, if we take that as an example, there was a chance that Gecko was going to completely break the game, right? With 10-second cooldowns, you can imagine that that would be quite a problem. And so they kind of had to create this kind of balance part baked into Gecko where you had to go and retrieve the abilities and not just automatically get them on a 10-second cooldown. And so that's probably why they've shied away from it so far, but there are many different things that they could do with non-linear agent design. The one that I personally keep thinking about and keep thinking it's quite interesting is, what does an agent who has a 3-cost ultimate look like? Right? But it could be other things as well, right? It could be agents that mess with the guns somehow, right? Maybe an agent who gets more ammo than other agents. Maybe, you know, an agent that has a true full passive ability where one of their abilities is just a passive and you don't touch it. Maybe agents who have an ability that gets stronger as the game goes in if they build it up more and more throughout the rounds, right? Like, there are different ways, many different ways of creating non-linear agent design that, again, even if you had, you know, pretty basic abilities in terms of what they actually did, by adding these non-linear elements, it creates kind of very unique spaces for these agents to survive in and potentially thrive in. And I'm sure there are many non-linear ideas that Riot is like, there's no way we can make this work, because they are perhaps going to be harder to balance overall, and you have to bake in those restrictions like with Gecko, right? I'm sure there's some things about, like, they probably don't want an agent that can change the gun damage, right? That's probably not something that they're going to touch. Or an agent that can, you know, pause the timer or something, right? Probably not things that they're likely to do. But I still think that there is enough things that you could do that would create interesting kind of dynamics and interesting kind of play patterns with agents that are somewhat non-linear. So that is just my idea. Let me know what kind of non-linear crazy ideas that you would like to see for an agent that you think, you know, reasonably could be balanced, right? For a 3-cost ultimate, My first thought is it's like a Cypher ult, but you only see the person who's closest to you, right? So you only get one ping from a Cypher ult. That would be a 3-cost ult as an idea. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Let me know.